2014 World MMA Awards would turn out to be one of the most important nights in the history of mixed martial arts. The annual event is the sport's closest equivalent to the Oscars. Anybody who is anybody flies out to Vegas for the party, and on that night, the Nevada State Athletic Commission was counting on it. Vitor Belfort had become an MMA god the year previous. He was suddenly built like the Greek pantheon, his thunderous head kick KOs destroying top contenders on his way to a middleweight title challenge that was announced just days before the award show, of which he was nominated for both Knockout and Fighter of the Year. The Phenom's career resurgence at 36 was fueled by testosterone replacement therapy, a controversial loophole that was gaining increased scrutiny, seen as legalized cheating, a free pass by the athletic commissions to turn yourself into a testosterone-charged monster so long as you had a doctor's note. The practice had been going on for years, but Belfort's decimation of the sport in 2013 had more and more people raising eyebrows and alarms. Everything was coming to a head. Vitor wouldn't pick up the World MMA Awards top honor on that night, his year likely seen as tainted by many voters because of his TRT use, but he would receive two things: the award for Best Knockout and a random drug test by NSAC. A few weeks later, MMA would never be the same again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to talk about how we got here, how TRT became the sport's biggest issue, how for a brief time fighters were essentially allowed PED usage with no consequences, not even required disclosures. We need to talk about how TRT nearly destroyed MMA's legitimacy and why maybe it didn't have much in the first place. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and this is when legalized cheating ruled the mixed martial arts world. Before we get into how this all went down, let's talk about what these TRT exemptions were and why they were a problem, because there's lots of misunderstanding. The athletic commissions allow for fighters to request what are known as TUEs, or therapeutic use exemptions, when applying for a license to fight. These are essentially requests by the fighter for the commission to make an exception on their rules about a particular banned substance based on some sort of medical need. So for example, Elias Theodoro, he was able to receive a TUE for medical marijuana use in competition from the BC Athletic Commission because a doctor had prescribed it for bilateral neuropathy pain. Now, he couldn't walk into the cage smoking a joint. There were still limits placed on the usage. It was just that it was no longer prohibited at the level of everyone else. This is essentially what was happening with TRT. Fighters were going to their doctors and being diagnosed with hypogonadism, which is really just a fancy word for low testosterone, or low T as the cool kids call it. From these diagnoses by legitimate medical professionals, fighters were being granted use exemptions for synthetic testosterone, something that is outright banned in and out of competition by every commission in the sport. So once a fighter was given a TUE, they were allowed to start TRT treatments, all done under the medical supervision of their doctor. And while they were now clear to use synthetic testosterone in that manner, there were still rules that must be followed. No fighter, even ones with exemptions, could have a TE ratio higher than what was considered within the normal range. The TE ratio, or testosterone to epitestosterone ratio, is something doctors can measure in urine, with elevated levels indicating you either have a medical condition that needs to be addressed, or you're likely using PEDs. A normal range is anywhere from 1:1 to about 4:1, but in order to give athletes leeway, some commissions allowed slightly higher ratios. For instance, Nevada, the standard for all commissions, allowed for up to a 6:1 TE ratio. If you were above that though, you were in big ass trouble, even if they couldn't find some illicit substance in your system. And so even the fighters who were allowed these TRT exemptions, they had to fall within the normal testosterone range. And if they didn't, they would get suspended just like anybody else. So you might be thinking up to this point, Tommy, where is the controversy here?
Where are they?
You're telling me that these fighters have legitimate medical conditions that are being diagnosed by physicians, the process is being overseen by medical professionals, and the commission does not allow them to have testosterone levels higher than the normal range. What is the problem?
Well, we're waiting.
Well, as it turns out, a whole bunch of stuff. First of all, the diagnosis of hypogonadism. According to Dr. Richard Aukus, an endocrinologist and professional of internal medicine who spoke with ESPN on the matter, hypogonadism in a healthy male in their 30s is super rare, less than 0.1% of the population. This condition, when it has a legitimate medical issue causing it, is usually from something severe like cancer, where one might have to have their testicles removed. So the way the doc explained it, these fighters who were going to their doctors and after the lab results showed low T levels being diagnosed, were likely suffering from idiopathic hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. I don't know what the fuck I just said, but Doc Aukus says it means there's nothing wrong with their balls.
Fresh and juicy, ready for the picking.
And thus our first major issue. This type of low T can be caused by steroid usage. When you pump yourself up with the juice, your body no longer has to produce testosterone at the levels it would normally. And so when you stop sipping the Capri Sun, the body's like, well, we didn't have to do that shit much anymore, and so we're just gonna keep on doing it like this. I mean, this is like drugs 101. You stop stop making your body do a thing with a drug, and then when you stop doing the drug, your body doesn't always kick back into gear on it. What else could cause this type of low T? Well, the natural aging process. You know, getting older. Something that every human is dealing with every second of their existence, so no special breaks there. Weight cutting might potentially be causing low T as well. Again, a process most all fighters are doing, and one that's voluntary. Nobody is diagnosed with weight cutting. It's something they're choosing to do to gain an advantage. Anti-aging Dr. John Pierce, whose name pops up a whole bunch as it relates to fighters getting diagnosed and then receiving TRT treatment, believed that many of the fighters likely suffered low T levels as a result of brain injury damaging the hypothalamus or pituitary. But as ESPN's Outside the Lines found by interviewing several experts,
the very violence of these sports can cause athletes' bodies to stop producing testosterone or growth hormone, and so athletes need to add these substances that are banned.
Those types of injuries had only usually been observed alongside actual brain bleeding, and there's not been any data in studies of CTE that show a connection between the condition and lower testosterone levels. Even if hypothetically it was these brain injuries, which it doesn't appear to be, should we be giving fighters more chances to get kicked in the head if they have a brain injury? So that's problem number one. Unless these fighters have a serious medical condition, which is super rare, their low T is likely either from aging, weight cutting, or taking steroids. Stuff that we probably shouldn't be rewarding a fighter for with extra human go juice. And in fact, MMA was the only sport allowing these exemptions without serious medical cause. The IOC, the NFL, boxing, baseball, nobody else has ever been that lenient on allowed TRT TUEs. What about the TE ratio though? That certainly seems fair, right? They have to stay in a normal range, so there's no elevated testosterone levels. This is just putting them on the same level as everybody else. Well, other than the fact that we just explained why they probably shouldn't get to be on the same level as everybody else, turns out they weren't anyway. See, your testosterone levels aren't constant. They can flux for all sorts of reasons.
Why is the pee stored in the balls?
No one knows. All we know is that it is.
But that's not the case when it's getting pumped into you manually. Derek from More Plates, More Dates recently explained it way better than I ever could.
Even at TRT levels, oxygen carrying capacity is increased, motor unit recruitment is increased, your ability to recover, and as well, if you have like a hard training session or even are overtraining, the average guy is going to have their testosterone nuked into the ground. You're going to be walking around like borderline hypogonadal with that much intensive training in an MMA capacity, whereas a guy on TRT, you could literally go drink, eat like shit, train however you want, and your level is manually maintained and stable. It does not dip up and down.
So the fact that these fighters have this constant level is already a huge advantage. But Dana White and many others theorized that because random testing basically didn't exist back then, a fighter could jack up their levels all camp and then just make sure they were back to a normal range for the fight week piss tests, getting all the advantages of training like an absolute monster in the lead up to their fights. This stuff sounds amazing, by the way. Listen to this hilarious quote from Rampage Jackson in Fighters Only magazine about his experience with TRT after a knee injury. I still gotta take care of my knee, but I feel like a 25-year-old again. My sex life changed. I was back to 5 times a night like when I was 25, straight up. I got stronger lifting weights. I was never good at lifting weights, but I was doing everything. Pull-ups and stuff, everything with my top half. And this brings up another issue. Older veteran fighters suddenly feeling like they're in their mid-20s again. They have all that knowledge and understanding of the sport that comes from a long career, but now they're moving around again like they're in their prime. Ironically, I think John Jones put it best.
But if I'm on TRT and I'm just as strong as I am right now, but I have 5 more years of experience under my belt, it's just not right. It's not right. If you're on TRT, it's time for you to go and become a dad and do something else.
On top of all that, like most medical information, no fighters were required to disclose that they were doing TRT treatments. So the other fighter may not have even known that their opponent was being pumped up with the good shit. Alright, so I think by now you get the point that TRT is absolutely an advantage. It's not just leveling the playing field, it's tipping things in the exempt fighter's favor, and it's extending careers unnaturally among a whole host of other issues. Now let's talk about how we even got here and how everybody finally came to their senses. Before the TRT era, drug testing and punishments in MMA were honestly pretty lax. I mean, in Japan they didn't even bother testing at all, and back home Josh Barnett was given a stern warning after testing positive for PEDs following his victory at UFC 34 against Bobby Hoffman.
Tell anyone about this, I'll fucking kill you.
A victory NSAC didn't even overturn either, and he received absolutely no suspension. He was back at UFC 36 to defeat Randy Couture and fail another test.
No offense, but you are a stupid asshole.
This time at least getting stripped of the title. I guess they learned their lesson. They didn't bother overturning the win though, that still counts. And sure, you did have embarrassing moments like Sean Shirk and Hermes Franca both testing positive after their lightweight title fight at UFC 73, but back in those days you got tested on fight day and that was it really. You never had to worry about what was going on throughout your camp. There weren't random tests, so if you were dumb enough to get caught on fight week, that was really the only time you could get in trouble. But why cheat when there's a loophole? What's particularly interesting about the TRT story is that we don't have a definitive start date. We know that TUEs were a thing, but what we don't know is who first started using them to get a T-boost. Through public record requests, ESPN was able to discover that Dan Henderson started treatment in 2007 and was given an exemption. But it's unclear if he was the first ever or not, because we don't know how good these records were kept, and many fighters didn't even appear to disclose this information to the commissions unless some sort of issue popped up. Not to mention they could have received their exemption elsewhere. But 2007 is not the real start of the TRT era, even though fighters were using TUEs then. It would be following UFC 117's main event that the concept of TRT treatments and the exemptions that were allowed for them would become a part of the popular discourse in the MMA community thanks to Chael Sonnen, who following his unbelievable performance against Anderson Silva, tested positive for elevated testosterone levels. In his subsequent hearing with the California Commission, Sonnen argued that he should be cleared because he was given a TUE in 2008 by Nevada and had been diagnosed with hypogonadism, hilariously telling the LA Times, "I either take this medicine or die," when it was discovered that he did not have a 2008 TUE from INSAC. Not to mention his TE ratio was 17-1.
Are you a big man? Huh? I'm talking to you. What?
California threw the book at him, and suddenly TRT was a hot topic. In that piece by ESPN where they tried to discover who had all been given TUEs for TRT over the years, they were only able to find 15 fighters on record from 2007 to 2013, the majority of them in the UFC. Henderson and Sonnen, Dennis Hallman, Todd Duffy, who appeared to have a legitimate medical issue, but I mean, it's a hard sell on pumping that guy up with testosterone when he looks like fucking Thanos. Shane Roller, Nate Marquardt, Frank Mir, Forrest Griffin, Rampage Jackson, Ben Rothwell, Vitor Belfort, and Bigfoot Silva, another fighter who absolutely legitimately had a medical reason for low T. But following his war with Mark Hunt at UFC Brisbane in 2013, he tested with higher than regular levels. So for this 3-year span from 2010 to 2013, you had all these high-profile fighters either admitting to being on TRT or having issues come up related to their usage. It didn't help the image of the process that of the 12 UFC fighters who were given TUEs, 4 of them had failed for PED usage prior to their exemptions, and another 3 more would fail after. So more than half had histories with performance enhancers. Not a good look. Neither was the fact that so many of them had mentioned that a UFC doctor had recommended they see an anti-aging specialist, something that, while not likely nefarious, had many thinking the UFC was encouraging TRT use.
That's fucking weird, huh? Holy shit.
Not to mention when the promotion went places without commissions, they themselves would have to issue these exemptions. Tensions were rising. As more cases popped up, the media started asking more and more questions. Dana White, who originally seemed happy with the process, eventually became exhausted by the constant questions about it and started openly calling for its end.
Who knows what's gonna happen? And at the end of the day, I don't give a shit. I don't care. If you need that stuff to perform and compete, you probably shouldn't perform or compete anymore.
And while Chael's 117 suspension and many of these other high-profile situations, Nate Marquardt getting released by the UFC after his issues with Pennsylvania related to his TRT treatment, Bigfoot's elevated levels tainting arguably the greatest heavyweight fight of all time, nothing brought more heat on TRT exemptions than Vitor Belfort. The Phenom got his TUE in February of 2011 right after the Anderson Silva fight. He would go 5-1 before the ban, only losing to John Jones but looking like an absolute unit doing it. We would find out later why. He had elevated testosterone levels before that fight. One of those anti-aging clinics that administered TRT caught it when they ran his labs. But we would only find out about that years later, and so it didn't add to the hysteria at the time. But it certainly looks really bad on the UFC after the fact since they let him fight. The perfect storm came together in 2013. Belfort started looking like a fucking superhero and openly admitted that he was doing TRT. It was already a massively controversial topic, but then Vitor started murdering people in Brazil like it was Jason Voorhees. First, a head kick finish of Michael Bisping in Sao Paulo, one that would permanently damage the Count's eye. Next, a spinning head kick KO against huge favorite Luke Rockhold in Jaraguá do Sul. At the post-fight presser, he would tell someone to hit John Morgan for asking him about TRT. Then it was the battle of the TRT freaks in Goiânia, Belfort versus Henderson. Another first-round KO head kick. Fans and media started speculating that Vitor was hiding in Brazil because Nevada wouldn't sanction his TRT use since he'd failed for PEDs in the past, something Dana White dismissed entirely, explaining Belfort fought in Brazil because he sold well well in Brazil.
We would never put together a situation where a fighter has an advantage over another fighter. Plus, Vitor doesn't fucking live in Brazil. Vitor lives in Florida.
Everything was coming to a head, and with the announcement of Vitor's middleweight title challenge at UFC 173 in Las Vegas that coming May, questions about what would be done to stop this madness were being asked daily. Then the World MMA Awards happened. Vitor would get a surprise piss test, and his T levels would be higher than the normal range. He had failed a test, and as a result would not apply for a license for the fight at 173. 3 weeks later, during a scheduled meeting, INSAC would vote unanimously to ban TRT exemptions in boxing and mixed martial arts, even though they'd never even received an application from a boxer. TRT was dead. The UFC followed suit immediately after, and so did the rest of the commissions. The sport's legitimacy getting a huge boost as Belfort's rampage was really starting to make things look out of hand. He would eventually get that title shot against Weidman after coming off TRT, looking like a shell of his former self, losing via TKO in the first round. A year after the ban, the UFC would partner with the US Anti-Doping Agency in an attempt to clean up the sport. And if you've seen our piece about the end of the PED era, you know how well that's all gone. Maybe MMA has always been a hotbed for PED usage. I mean, it most certainly has been and will be forever, as is the case with most sports. But what made the TRT era so unique was that it wasn't something done in the shadows. It was right in your face and with the compliance of the entire sport. A ridiculous loophole that it's hard to imagine happening in any other realm of athletics. It's really incredible to think that such a time even existed in mixed martial arts, or how the hell we survived it with any legitimacy left intact. But we did, proving yet again that MMA is pretty damn resilient.
I'm Bailey from MMA On Point, and yes, we are finally here in our brand new office. Let's go check it out.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to our MMA Challenge of the Week.
Today, I'm joined by the greatest referee in the world, Mr. Mark Goddard.
I would punch him straight in the back of the fucking head.
That's right, a brand new channel with brand new content. Welcome to Fight Front, the home of personality-driven MMA.
Today, it's an MMA challenge where I take the worst rated UFC character in UFC Undisputed 3 all the way to the heavyweight championship of the world.
And I'm reacting to Colin McGregor.
Make sure you scroll on down and hit subscribe because you do not want to miss all the new content coming your way on this brand new channel.
And hey, it's me, Tommy Toehold, and I'm rolling around on a damn monitor. Big ol' shout out to my dude Luke Taylor for editing this video together. You can find him and his awesome digital art on Twitter at @cooltome_. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe. We've got 3 new videos or more for you every single week. Let us know what you thought of the video in the comments below. Follow On Point MMA on Twitter, and have yourself a wonderful day.